Executive Director over at the Gaslamp Quarter Historical Foundation. I'd like to welcome you all to our monthly History Talks lecture. This month we have Rob Hagey, Jimmy Parker, and Michael Trimble talking about Street Scene, the music festival that transformed the Gaslamp Quarter. So take it away.
Wow. I'll start. All right, I just want to give you a little bit of background and set this up. But Bill and I have been talking about this for a little bit, and when the opportunity came to speak, my one demand is I need to bring Rob Hagey. And I want to give a little bit of an introduction because Michael and I started as young kids, a few years younger than Rob. We were the guys that kind of putting the pieces together. But there is no street scene without Rob Hagey. It's not just a name. It was his vision. It was his passion. I never, in all the different groups I work with, different producers, and that list is fairly significant, that has a passion for music. And I can remember many times that he would bring a band and he'd play the tape and then the CD, and he'd go, listen to this. And I'd look and I said, I just want to plug it in. That's my job. And I put the generator, I do that. But every time he hit so many home runs, and that's why it's Street Scene. What you heard when you came to Street Scene was his joy of music. And that's why it wasn't a rock concert, it wasn't a jazz concert, it wasn't a blues concert. It was everything that he loved. And that included art, food, and all that. So with that, I want to introduce my dear friend, Rob Hagey.
All right. Well, thank you. This is a real honor for me to be here to have the street scene be recognized after all these years. So, I mean, working with these two, it's been, really between the three of us, there's just a tremendous amount of history that we have and share. And it's, I look back at the early years that we did this event. We were, I want to think it was like 82, 83. 83, I was lucky to work with George Wein. He's the sort of the mastermind behind the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival. He's the guy that started the Newport Jazz Festival. He, for a while, had a touring festival called the Cool Jazz Festival, cool with the letter K. And in 83, I was the producer of that festival, and we brought it down into the streets of Gaslamp here. And we had all sorts of rooms that we used at that same time. I mean, down in the Onyx room, there was a basement. I think we used Ingrid Croce's space, and there was an alley that she had at one point. And so I want to think that there was probably about 7 different locations within the Gaslamp that we worked with to coordinate music and live music. And it just sort of, we had a stage in the street, and we had a group called Room Full of Blues out of Boston area. And and the stage was low off the ground. But when they finished, we couldn't get them off the stage safely. I mean, everybody was having such a great time. And at that time period, I think it was like a $6 admission to get into it. And we couldn't block the sidewalks off. We could block the street, but we couldn't say no to people wanting to come and go on the sidewalks. And when we did this, of course, we did this with, I think, rope. So basically, it became a free festival at that time period, and when Room Full of Blues was playing, we just said, play, and then just play and get off the stage playing your music as best you can. And it really set really the sort of the motivation and the inspiration for Street Scene, which started in '84. So I mean, having that experience and having the passion for jazz music and seeing the history of what jazz festivals were doing, they were annual festivals. And at that time, other than Jazz Fest in New Orleans, which was just starting, we became the largest music festival in the state of California. So it lasted a little while. I mean, then Coachella happened, then they became and are one of the best festivals in the world. And I was really very fortunate because a lot of the talent that we booked brought a lot of inspiration as well as the location. So that was part of the juggling act of trying to create an event that would happen annually. People could look forward to it, bring in talent, and put it in the streets, which was this magic sort of feeling. And it was a really wonderful sort of thing that just sort of organically expanded from 2 stages. And what was the tag for that?
5 bands, 5 hours, $5.
$5. And then there was, I think somebody came up and said that means you could bring 5 actual deer bucks over, and I remember that.
I remember that.
Yeah.
That comment came into play. But and it was, if you look back at it, I think we had Los Lobos and the Blasters, X and the Neville Brothers, and I think that's just sort of like an example. Jack Mack and a Heart Attack. It was sort of this combination of taking different musical styles that broadened the scope and the fun of what street scene became. And a couple years later, we could, instead of going back and forth on the stages, we kind of used an L form of one of the stages, and I think the Fabulous Thunderbirds were part of that. And all of a sudden, it didn't. You didn't have to go back and forth. You could literally play both stages at the same time, because initially, if you have stages facing each other, you're going to get nosebleed and it's going to be a mess. But if you have and use buildings as blocking the sound, you really can have 2 stages going on simultaneously. And that grew to 3 stages and 4 stages. And at one point in time, I think we had 12 stages at Street Scene over a course of 3 days.
If you count the venues. We had 12 street stages, but we had
that's right.
Dick's.
That's right.
We had actually one in the courtyard here, the theater.
Well,
we were in a lot of places.
Jimmy's bringing up, which is really a really wonderful thing about being in a place. You create venues within the venue. You use spaces that, here's an alley. Here's the Horton Grand Theater. I think we did some music here in what was the courtyard at the Horton Grand here. Anywhere and everywhere there was an opportunity, we wanted to put a stage. And it was all part of the fun of what was really sort of a happening experience of what street scene could do. So you turn a corner, there's music. You turn another corner, there's another stage. And I look back at that, and I think that was one of the real charms and real sort of energy of what street scene brought. And on top of that, the music. It's sort of at the end when you look back and see James Brown and Wilson Pickett and Ray Charles and Sam of Sam and Dave, and then there was Eric Burden, and then there was X, and this is at War, and I mean there was just just an enormous amount of talent, and then within that there was new talent. I mean, then there was we had Richard Thompson play from Fairford Convention. Then on that same stage, it was all this different ways of creating music. We had the Gap Band, the Dad's Band, Rolls Royce. And then blues. I mean, there wasn't a single blues artist that we didn't have at Street Scene, whether it was B.B. King or whether it was Little Milton or whether it was Robert Cray, and I mean, you name it, we had him.
Albert Collins' last show.
Really? That's true. His very last show. His last show was with us. So I mean, music is definitely a passion of my life, and it was part of the outgrowth of what Street Scene became, and it really was and became a huge event. And the dollar amount of producing it became higher and higher, and the risk became higher and higher. And there were good years when it would rain or not rain, and then there were years that when it would rain, I remember once I stayed at the Hilton Grand for for about 6 hours, just so that I didn't want to think about the rain. So yeah, it was just a really fun, a wonderful, hair-raising time period in my life, and it was 25 years from 1984 officially. We did 2 to 2009, and 08 and 09 were tough years in the market and the economy, and it was one of the sort of the end of the era of street scene, because it was just too much financially for me to take on. But you know, between us, we have these great stories. We have great artists that we look back and hit, you know, home runs. And then there was an act in 2008 that I did not book. She was just too weird after we had booked Beck and I think the Black Crows. And then there's new artists, Lady Gaga, and I said, it just didn't make sense, you know.
And don't forget Dave Matthews.
Yes.
He didn't get radio play back then.
He did not. And of course, this is Michael. He was really pushing these bands that he was listening to when he was in college, and that was part of it. Dave Matthews was one of your faves.
Sure.
So I mean, there are these great stories, and I think that choosing the music and choosing a venue, there is magic that we created here in the Gaslamp, and I know that there are events that have been inspired by street scene. I know that Life is Beautiful, which is a new festival in Las Vegas, and they were directly, I'm walking into the festival, the first year they're doing it, I run into the promoter and he looks at me and he says, you know, we were inspired by street scene to do this festival, and right now that festival carries on, and it's very popular in the sort of old downtown district of Las Vegas. And I do know that Kaboo, when they first started, I think 75% of the acts that played it were street scene favorites, street scene alumni. And it just was, you know, it's a wonderful feeling that it carries on, and that people remember the festival for what it was and what we did and how we changed the sort of the outlook of what Gaslamp and East Village was all about. So, I mean, I kind of want to turn it over, because I think what happens is I have this vision, and then these two make it happen for me. I mean, what transpires is that Jimmy will come in, and I'll say, let's, you know, hey, why don't we, you know, we'll put a stage over here. And Jimmy will go, I think I can make that work. And so what he does is he puts it on a PowerPoint. And when he does that, you know, that was the later part.
Yeah.
You know, the early part was taking a ruler and drawing the street and measuring the street and figuring out how wide the stage can be, and working with the fire marshal and figuring out a way to get a variance so that we could put the stage there. Because that, again, was another challenge that street scene had. It was, streets basically are 50 feet wide here in the Gaslamp, if I'm correct. 11 foot wide, this is my memory, 11 foot wide sidewalks, right?
Depends. There's 12s and 14s. It's 80 feet between the buildings.
Okay. and again, you know,
Who's measuring?
but this is exactly how it is. I mean, that's exactly how I would sort of think about trying to do an event, of how that might work. Let's put a stage over here, and that's exactly what would happen. Would be,
Yeah, but okay, we were drawing it by hand, so you're talking about 3 by 5 drawings, and then he'd look at it and go, yeah, but I want it over here. I got to draw the whole drawing again because he wants it over here. He got what he wanted, but that's also then where I made cutout stages and all that, and then I just started using tape.
And that's what we did.
And then
in
you
the
could
early
go,
years.
and then so I could draw it once.
Well, then the
Then
ball
computers came in, but that got better.
But then the ball got passed to Michael.
Oh, yeah.
Because Michael, I could say, let's do a stage here, and then the impact of that stage location and its location in relationship to a business and how that might work. Because then you don't want a generator or a porta potty, you know, right in front of somebody's business. So Michael, that's when you got really creative. And I mean, it's part of a real team that we created. And by the way, our team of street scene, the people that were really involved in making it work, we had the smallest team of all of these festivals that you hear about. I mean, we were grassroots, we were hands-on, everybody had their passion into it. People spent late nights, early mornings. And I mean, so when we wanted to put a stage in a location that Jimmy would draw, Michael would try to make it work. And I certainly remember all these different businesses and the impact. You kind of want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, I remember initially, no one wanted that. No one wanted that job.
Microphone.
First of all, no one wanted that job. I'm like, okay, that's a
right.
good
And this hat
segue.
looks good on you.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I can just back up a second. I mean, I was Rob Hagey's tennis protege back in 1982.
That's true.
So I lived down the street from Rob. He was my tennis coach all the way through high school.
True.
And I remember the first street scene. He's like, I'm doing this concert. Maybe you should come down. I go, Rob, I'm not 21. He goes, don't worry about it. We'll get you in there. We'll figure out a way to get you in. And so it was 84, and the wine bank was not the wine bank. It was the Old World Deli, and Rob gave me a job of pushing things around and painting signs, and then just stand there and enjoy yourself. So I stood there and watched X walk back and forth and things of that nature, and I was like, oh wow, this is cool. I'm kind of liking this. Fast forward, after college, I came to work with Rob, shot photos for him, and then that's where the community part came in. So,
But you gotta say that when Michael came from college, he had long hair, he had a guitar strapped to his back, he had a camera in the front of him, and
yeah,
he was right out of Boulder.
right. That's true. That's very true. It's very true. But so that's when I met Jimmy and Nevin and all the guys who produced the events and production. And like Rob said and like Jimmy said, it was like, okay, here's the map. Can you just make this work? Just go talk to the people. They'll let them, figure it out. And I'm like, oh boy. And I'd sit down and look at what businesses were there, and I touched on the Royal Pie Bakery and his deliveries and all these old places, and the American Mushroom and the Cal Coast distributors and all these places that don't exist anymore, which is now the Gaslamp. I had to go in and figure out a way to work with their schedules and work with what their businesses needed to do and make it work, and then also try and get everyone then that venue through one gate, for that whole time frame over 2 days. So that was always a challenge, a lot of fun. And then Rob would change the map, and I'd go, oh my God. Like Jimmy said, I'm like, oh, we're just adding this building and that business and that. Yeah, oh, don't worry about it. You could make it work. I made it work every single time, I think. Well, most times, I think. So it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun and a lot of challenges as well. And it sort of puts me where I am today, actually. Working as the director of the Gaslamp Quarter Association. So it kind of started me down in the Gaslamp really early in 1984, and I never really left the Gaslamp. So it's a really neat thing to see the Gaslamp Quarter evolve from those early days where it was parking lots and produce companies and definitely different kind of restaurants. Old Spaghetti Factory was probably the only one there, and it was crazy, And another thing that Rob would say, he goes, "We need a production warehouse. Can you find us a place to put all our stuff?" So I'd go out and rent like empty warehouses and Quad A storage. I don't know if any people remember Quad A storage, which is where the ballpark is, and we had some crazy places that were not very clean most of the time. They were pretty scary. And I'd bring Jimmy in and I'd say, "Jimmy, this is going to be great, right?" And he'd look at me and go, how are we going to clean this? I mean, yeah.
We did.
Yeah, and we did. So those are the kinds of dynamics that we all worked on together, and every year the festival got bigger and bigger and more expansive, and we took over parking lots and really kind of just grew as Gaslamp grew around it. So that was the interesting thing is, Gaslamp really was burgeoning in those early years, and right through the 90s, early 90s, the Gaslamp really had a a fire. You know, I mean, it was the place to be. It was the only neighborhood that was kind of risky and fun and exciting, and everyone wanted to be in the Gaslamp Quarter. And so it was a really neat experience to be able to, you know, work on a festival that people had so much passion for, you know, and everyone who worked on the event were so passionate about what they did and how they fit into the equation. And, you know, I was a music nut back then and still am, and Rob would always come over and he'd say, come into my office and listen to this guy and listen to this guy. And I'm like, ooh, this is good. Yeah, Roy Hargrave. I like that guy.
Yeah,
It's
great
like,
jazz.
I'm going to book a Blondie this year. So we booked Debbie Harry and actually played in the Horton Grand Theater. I don't think what year that was, but we definitely
94, 95?
Something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah. We had Jason Mraz.
yeah, Jason Mraz, and actually
we had, what was it?
Stuart Copeland played in the theater as well. I mean, so many jazz. It was the jazz stage.
Yes,
It was a really
Tony Williams.
intimate venue that was unbelievable. You could go and be in this huge crowd of people, and then you could come and sit and watch this amazing jazz performance, and just be transported to another place, and then leave and go see Buckwheat Zydeco right in front of you know. Right outside of Cafe Sevilla, right there, you know, and you know, it
On
was
4th, right here.
on 4th, yeah. So, few stories about this hotel specifically. Rob also had another great idea as he's talking about putting stages in interesting places. The garage of the Horton Grand Hotel, which is full of all their stuff, became a venue called Zombie A Go-Go back in the day. They cleared everything out, and we put it in the alley, and we had this crazy venue in the actual garage. But I think we had only one fire exit
A very big door.
and a very big door, right? But we wanted to keep the door closed. But we
Fire marshal didn't like that.
yeah, well, so we worked that out as
Yeah.
well, so that was pretty cool. But yeah, and then the one of the most finest moments, I think, and most classic event stories. I'm gonna tee it up for Jimmy. Is I got a call on the radio that Ray Charles will not go on stage because he does not like the chair that we've given him to play his piano. And I said, okay, stand by. I have an idea. So I run into the Palace Bar, and I get Greg Baldiga, who is the GM here, and he's been the GM here for every street scene. I've known him since, you know, I started here. I said, Greg, I'm going to borrow one of your chairs. Ray Charles needs it. He goes, okay, no problem. So I ran out with the chair, and I ran through the backstage, and I gave the chair to the stage manager, and I said, here you go, make it happen. And Ray Charles played on that beautiful stage, and I think that he was actually late getting there too, wasn't he? Was that the bus fiasco, or
No,
that was some another
that was a connection fiasco.
Okay.
Yeah, not the bus.
many years, all blending together. But
That was Ben Harper.
Ben Harper.
That was
right,
a whole different
right,
thing.
right. No, but it was a great experience in my life and really taught me a lot. You know, Rob is an inspirational guy, and not only did he teach me how to have a great forehand, great serve, and but he taught me how to, you know, broaden my horizons about music. You know, taught me about how to, you know, deal with people and different kind of adversities and challenges, and really, you know, molded, you know, me before I went on to leave and work in corporate America. You know, put on a tie, cut my hair. Oh, by the way, Jimmy, we can hand out some of those passes right there.
Oh.
I actually brought every single pass that I worked on,
Start these up.
every event, and there might even be a picture of me with long hair in there somewhere.
Yes,
There it is.
yes, there is.
Yeah, Rob had a great idea. Let's put our pictures on the back of these passes so we know who it is, and the security knows who it is.
Right.
And Jimmy got his picture on there, and he was actually looking very grumpy with a hat on, and he was really sad and angry.
It was a cold, wet
Yeah.
year.
So we gave him a title. I said, yeah, was it
Frumpy.
Frumpy the Production Troll? Yeah. It sticks to this
I thought it
day.
looked good.
Yeah, you did. You did look good. So,
So, I really want to say that at one point in time, there was I mean, this is not an easy festival to produce in a high amount of businesses and residents that all live here and work here. And one of the concerns is if you put in an event inside the venue, how are the restaurants and how are the businesses going to work? When you take the businesses that are outside of it, how is that going to work? How are your entrances going to work? Well, one of the things that it was a real struggle to how do we want to make this festival happen year after year and not create sort of a bad vibe with everybody. We don't want to be, another year I'm going to lose money. So what these two did is they came over to my house and we all sort of figured out how we could do in and out privileges, create dinner packages for people to be incentivized to come back. We reduced ticket prices for those, and it really changed.
Changed the North's view of what street scene was to
Yes.
them. Made it a successful weekend as opposed to a detriment.
But it made a better event.
It did.
Yeah.
And you worry as a promoter, you worry about the in and out privileges. I mean, if you go to concerts, not often have the ability to attend the concert and then walk out and then come back in again. You don't normally get in and out privileges, and it's an insurance liability. If you go someplace and you drink more and then you come inside the venue, the liability falls on the promoter, and in those situations. My fears evaporated once we started it. It was absolutely a wonderful success, a wonderful idea, and it really helped the relationships with the Gaslamp Quarter businesses and the association and the foundation to make all of it work. So, I mean, it's really that's really team effort. I mean, that's really thinking outside the box. That's really, Michael was working with American Express, and a number of his clients were here in the Gaslamp, and it's sort of morphed from there.
Yeah, I would take a vacation every year to work this event. And I got a lot of strange looks from my wife at the time, and she was like, "Really? You're going to take a vacation to work street scene?" I said, "Yeah, honey, it's great. You can come down, you can come see the shows." And yeah.
Right.
So that was fun.
Yeah.
And then,
But
and then people like me and a lot of people that Rob said, it was a very small group. Many of us grew up with the event. We'd come off the road. We'd be touring with other bands, but we'd keep September free to come back for this show. And there's still many of them still in the industry and have companies that are quite successful in the industry. And but it was what we considered our one-year reunion. That no matter where we went in the world, we'd be back in September in San Diego. And that also really makes it easier when on that third day and you haven't slept and you're in the same shoes. I won't mention underwear, but shoes. It's a little easier to smile and keep working and make sure you do it right.
Now, he had his brother work the festival. He had his wife work the festival. I mean,
Sister, kids,
right. And,
mom.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it was all that. I mean,
What
that's
was the budget? They work cheap.
That's right. But that's part of what this became, and it really made a difference in the spirit of how we could get things accomplished.
Well, and one thing we talked about before we got here, and I think this is a good time to do that. Usually when these stories come out, the light's a little lower and the beer is much colder. So we thought, we're going to forget so much. Help us remember. We'd actually like you guys to ask questions about things you want to know. That'll help us remember and really give you what you want to hear. Because we could sit and tell stories all night long, but we'd actually really like to hear what you liked about street scene, what you were curious about street scene. Even if you never went, ask about the inspiration about certain people or certain acts played. So please, I'm opening the floor. Joan.
I'll start. Well, first, I'd like to apologize for all the hassles I personally gave you over disrupting our business. And I was a pain in the butt sometimes. I'd also like to thank you for the free passes that you gave me and the fact that you snuck my son in
Right.
when he was too young.
I'm just learning this.
My question is, how did you find the Red Elvises? That was like my favorite act. I couldn't get over those guys. And,
Eagle.
You know, who found it and who booked
Right.
them?
That falls on me, and it's they're just you try to find acts that are fun, because you're in the street, people are standing, they're not sitting in a chair. It's it's how do you make that work entertainment-wise? And they were just a riot. Those straitjackets. I mean, you think about some of those bands that played that had just a whole fun element. So
How did they come to your attention? I mean,
But that
you
that's
just were there.
well, yes, it's what
Talk a
I.
little bit about your living room and his office. He downplays that. You walk in, okay, Spector had a wall of sound. That was speakers. The music library, the things he would listen to, and I'm not kidding, listen to this tape. That's what it was. He was consuming music.
You see
And then he was bringing it back to-
CD collection now.
Yeah,
Quite
exactly.
So it's yes. I mean, that's part of, that's an interesting thought on this, because street scene came about through love of music. It came about through the thought that we could have the event work in tandem with the quality of artists. And I was always trying to find newer artists. It's harder to get people to go to hear new artists. So you need to kind of build that in with some more known artists. But my passion was always acts like you're talking about, the Red Elvises and the Zap Mamas. I mean, there were some unbelievably wonderful treasures that we ended up booking, and it became a higher risk, because we did spend a lot of energy on jazz acts and Zydeco acts that didn't necessarily have a large following.
Because remember, forget about Google. There weren't personal computers and cell phones. So he would discover an act that may be out of East Africa. So not necessarily getting a lot of play on the East Coast, Southern California, until they got here. And then many a band after that, many stayed.
And you had to tie that into a known act to get people to hear the unknown acts. And so it's a real booking kind of tough thing to kind of figure out. And we would always have a stage and the different levels of talent that we could put in there, and a budget that would go to that, and how do we get people to get to that stage, and how would it work with another stage that might be competing with it. So it's really was the challenging, fun, and drove you nuts process.
Do you guys have a list of everybody you had each year? Do you have that all documented?
I think we do. Yes.
You need to put that. Wikipedia is woefully short.
Okay.
On
Yes,
it,
it is.
yeah.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is. Yes, it is.
I worked street scene as part of the BQ Water Polo Club for about 4 or 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And my question is, how did you get the inspiration to get nonprofits involved? Because we funded our water polo by coming down and working. And we didn't have to sell candy. It was great.
It's that's another thing that really happened. The idea of paid, it was like paid volunteer. It really just started when I walked across the street. I was invited to a party, like a Christmas party, and the couple that was having the party was the lacrosse coach, men and women's coach at UCSD. And they sort of instigated this process of introducing me to Bob and Darcy.
Mm-hmm.
Who came, Darcy Bingham, and they all came from San Diego State and UCSD, where they had these intramural programs. And the idea was that we would pay each person that worked it, the amount of people that worked it, but that money all went to their nonprofit. The coaches would be the sort of managing the process of how this would work. And I don't know. I want to think that over the course of the history of street scene, I think we ended up donating $1 million.
With all, and that's the way you say PQ. Those first years we started with 2 colleges, but and I'm a rugby player from San Diego State, so John worked a lot with my guys that were on the signage team and all that, and how we are. But with the success of it, we were able to develop that added in USD, Point Loma Nazarene, and then we said, well, there are plenty of other programs at the high school level that had very organized parents. And that's all we really look for. We look for those managers, because we found running the number of bars and retail outlets, because we had
And the cash that went through it.
we did the front gates, so we had people who under 21 could do ticket sales. It's a big process, and also making that a fundraiser. And I'm going to call them kids because I'm old, but the fact is those kids were far more dedicated than any employee. They were raising money for their team. They were working with their teammates to make themselves successful. The esprit de corps that they created, we didn't invent. We just benefited, and it just kept growing.
And the captains or the coaches of them were responsible for making sure that there wasn't a lot of theft, or that
There wasn't any. There really
Right.
wasn't
it
any.
Was just amazing how
And
well
responsible service. They went through all the training.
Training with
they,
ABC.
They
Yes.
followed it to the T. And I'm going to tell you, I'm a former bartender, and I've worked with a lot of bartenders. Bartenders do what they do. These people, these kids, did what they were supposed to do. And that's what, that responsible service, managing those lines, turn and burn, do your job. And I love giving the one speech I used to give. Mr. Hagey does not want to sell one more drink tonight. We'll do just fine. If you say no, we got your back. And I think it was after that year, we didn't get a single citation for public drunkenness, overservice, underage, after that ever. We had a few in the beginning, but it just locked down because they were working for their team. They weren't necessarily working for us. It was their
team,
their entrepreneurship, their little franchise. Yes, sir.
Can you say a word about how much of an obstruction or an assist you got from the city, government, and hierarchy? What was that relationship like? The city was putting a lot of effort into making downtown change.
Well,
Did they realize or recognize your role?
not really. I mean, it was a challenge for us. It was a business for the city. We paid the San Diego Police Department, we paid for the fire division, and it was usually at the discretion with different meetings that we would have with fire or police to determine how many bodies that they would need to be there, and it was always out of our control.
And the
There-
attitude book.
I want to think that there were 3 years that we did 5-year contracts, so there were 15 years in the 25 years we did
And that
street
was a good
scene.
improvement. The year to year was tough.
The year, but what was difficult was that we had to do a percentage of money to the city from the ticket sales. So we'd have to go through an audit with a representative from the city sitting in our accounting firm's offices to go through each of the tickets sold so that the city could get their rightful number. And usually we were pretty close.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty close. I mean, we're talking within maybe 15 people here or there out of 40, 50,000 people. So it was a. But to really answer your question, that I would have wanted, if as a promoter, I would have wanted to say, we're benefiting the city. The city's making money on the tax occupancy, money that comes from the restaurants and the hotels, that we're making money for the city. We're creating a destination. And at the time, it was the Padres and the Chargers, it was the zoo, it was everything else but street scene. And so we had to deal with a lot of challenges. And I think now, festivals are a real big business. Cities want to see events like this take place. And I think that the city might take a different ear going forwards from here on.
But I want to add one thing. That on the collective, yes, but there were a lot of individuals in the city.
Wonderful. Was
And even at the
Carolyn?
state level, Bob Sumner. Different people who, for me especially as technical, as we're working for public safety and doing it right, they were right there with us, and they were helping us make this thing special. In many ways, writing a fire code that didn't exist, because no one did what we were doing anywhere in the state, and they all defer to the state fire code. But there were also like Captain Cash with the police department. I can go down the list. There were individuals who absolutely helped us, who were there in support of the event. A collective, not so much. That's policy, that's legislative. Like I said, it was really tough having to be in front of city council every year. The 5-year deal helped, but trying to get the 5-year deal
Was hard.
was hard.
But, you know, Bob Sumner was with the fire division, and he was a big part of our success and connections to try to make something work that might be very difficult to work. And Captain Cash, Mike Cash, when things, he said, let's make this work. Don't panic. If something could be brewing, he said, let's make this work. And absolutely, those are Carolyn Wormser, was another wonderful person that helped me throughout. I mean, she started in 90 or 91, all the way through to the end of Street Scene's time.
Bill, this goes worldwide, right? I got to add this in. So Bob Sumner, quick story. He's the fire marshal. We would get to doors. Everything's set to go, and he had all his sub-fire marshals all through the event, all that, and he'd get on the radio, I'm off. He'd go to his car. He came out with the flash-looking suit and all that. He came to the event. He looked at the lineup. This was Street Scene. He did all the work up to it, and he said, guys, it's yours. And he went and enjoyed it. So I always say.
That is a great story, but he had Michael in the, he took him around. You want
On the golf cart, yeah.
Oh yeah, back in the day, we it was a big venue. There were a lot of cars.
You gotta move over to the
Yeah.
Sorry about that. There were a lot of cars, and so another great fun job I had was making sure that Jimmy had a clear venue so Rob could open the doors on time. So the fire marshal would sit with me, and we'd drive around this huge venue, and there's tons of cars, and we'd be like, "You got to move your car. You got to move your car." And you know, there are a few times we towed a few cars. I think we towed a lot of cars until we figured out that people knew that we mean business when we had tow trucks following us around, you know, the venue. So that was.
But do you pay for a tow anymore? You still call him Bronco, right?
I still have
Okay.
free tows, free
He's known
jail.
as Mr. Mike.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So it was crazy. So I always helped get the doors open for that.
But it was a real key part
Yeah.
of you were the one that called the event open.
Mm-hmm.
Every year.
He was the one.
Bill.
As somebody who moved our business downtown in 1985 to Horton Plaza, you know, Horton Plaza was sort of considered the foundation of redevelopment in downtown. The city was working hard to get downtown revitalized. But you were the other thing that brought a lot of people downtown. It was clear to me that a lot of people who didn't come downtown in San Diego in that era came down for street scene, looked around and said, wow, this is cool. Now, a question for you. The economics of street scene changed a lot. I mean, it used to be you had a lot of parking lots, you could put up big stages. Tell us about the economics, the crowd sizes, how they changed over time, and why downtown kind of quit being viable for street scene.
Well, it's a really, really great question, because every single year we did street scene, every single year it changed. Every single year the onus would be on Jimmy to try to create the vision of making a stage work where there wasn't a stage before. And we relied a tremendous amount on parking lots, and basically because the production, you couldn't put a larger act on a stage that had limited size. And so we relied on parking lots to accommodate the crowd size, because another issue would be if you have a funnel situation where, actually it happened during Sheryl Crow and B.B. King at different years, where you had a stage at the end of the street and you had buildings on each side, and you had basically the width of the street and the sidewalks to look at the stage. And so the idea of using parking lots became a much wonderful added way of time it would take to build a stage, the sight lines, and the size of the stage that would create a need for the type of acts that played that would draw more people. So that was a big part of it.
That one shows parking lots and streets that we had. There used to be a time I would stand up on the now Marriott then the Ramada, and then became the Clarion. But we'd be on the top, and we could judge crowd size because there was no buildings in the way. Because we could look and we could say, okay, it's flowing here to here, and then they knocked down Bridgeford Meats, and I had a hole in the ground the one year. We couldn't use it, and then the Goodwill building goes down. But remember, I had a big basement, so a third of that lot we had to cordon off for safety. So there's a
The
lot.
TM Cobb building fell over.
Oh, on a couple, yeah, about a dozen
that is
cars.
right. That was like the week before.
Week
Yeah.
before. But it was, I mean, and it was kind of a little bit of a chess game. Sometimes you had to jump around a corner. Sometimes you could fit in the street. We built a couple around telephone poles when we still had them, where you would look, and I don't know if we have any of the pictures here, but there's a telephone pole right off of stage right, and there's the speakers right in front, because we had to fit the stage. But it was a lot of fun every year, because again, he'd say, I want it here, and I'd walk out there a month before and go, oh, no.
And
we would still figure it out.
Figure it out. You know, as the event grew from Gaslamp, we had to move into East Village. And that had a lot to do with the open space that we were losing. And a great story was that in 2003, we had a stage that had REM and had Macy Gray and Wilco,
Sex Pistols.
the Sex Pistols. I mean, all these really great acts that played on it. And literally, the day after we finished, a fence went up in that same area. And what went in?
Oh, that's
What building is that?
it's actually a couple buildings.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is it the Mark?
It's
Yes,
the
it
Mark.
was the Mark.
Yeah.
So that literally, and so we had to work with the developers to determine how we could get use of the property to be able to use it, to create a venue. So it was always kind of tricky.
Tell the story about we had a dirt lot, but we wanted to paint it green.
The green dog.
Yeah. Go ahead, tell that one.
This is the same lot. It was a square block, and I wanted to think that we could take the dirt and transform it into grass. So we literally, you get one of those
Pumpers.
it's a pump that takes the seeds
And fertilizer.
and fertilizer, and you spray the whole area. And it was working. Grass was growing.
We didn't have enough time.
But we didn't have a full amount of time, so we painted the grass. And the golf carts and everybody that worked it, they all turned green.
And one of our guys, he had an Australian shepherd that went everywhere with him, but she just loved to roll in that green, and that's the green dog story. And of course, she was green for the entire street scene.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean those are fun things.
Sir.
Yes, I've planned a couple of big dinner parties, but nothing like this. You guys are to be commended for. Look at that, that's amazing. I'm just curious about the profitability. Was it profitable every year? And if so, is there a sense of what it might bring in a year? I'm curious about that. And who got the money?
Well, I can answer that very well. There were good years, and then there were not very good years. And when you are looking at an event that has, say, this threshold, this much of a threshold of potential money that can be made, and this would be the volume of people coming in. If you get this much as your break even, that you've got all this below you that are your expenses, and any one of those notches down is the loss of money. And so there were really two entities that made money. It was the nonprofit liquor license holder, which was Festival Foundation. They made the money off the bar, and then there was my company. And my company and I was a for-profit, and one year there was $1 million made. The next year, $1 million lost. And another year where $500,000 is lost. And so when it came to like the third year, and this was an example, I think, '98 lost money. That was the year that the Padres were in the pennant that year. That was when Prop C was in place. So '98 lost money, '99 broke even, 2000 broke even, 2001 made a lot of money. So it made $1 million, we'll say. 2002, it rained on Friday, and so much of our audience is, now when you buy a ticket, you buy it online, you got the ticket, everything's fine. It was a walk-up. Everything was walk-up. So it's all predicated on what the weather conditions were like. And we dealt with heat waves and rain and cold weather. I mean, it was all sort of a roll of the dice of how it would go. 2001 made money, 2002 didn't, 2003 didn't, 2004 did. And again, it's chemistry of the bookings. I mean, in that year we had Outkast, which was a great hip-hop act and was huge. And some of it is just luck. Some of it's Jack Johnson played that year.
Kanye?
And Kanye played 06.
Oh,
Yes.
06, that's right.
06. On the bill with Wu-Tang.
Oh, yes.
So, so it's really an unknown. I mean, what was difficult for me was the perception that I was making money, because the knowledge of that it cost X amount to get in, it cost, and there were a lot of people, but the unknown was the amount of money it cost to pay an artist. I mean, Kanye was paid at that time $350,000, and there were other acts that were paid $400. There was other acts that were paid $100, $150, and so when you have a budget that could be $1 million and your talent, or $1.5 million, your exposure is predicated on weather and your competition in the market and so many different variables. So it was really hard for one person to take it on. It was sort of the wonderful success and the bottom failure of how it ended. It ended in '09 with a tremendous amount of losses, and it just was those are just tough times economically at that time period. And soon after that, music festivals became really big, and I can say that a lot of the festivals that are big now, a lot of the people that run those were at Street Scene at different times of the year, scouting talent, thinking of ideas, and getting inspired by what we were doing. But it was too much for one person. So
Thank you.
Can you talk about the age ranges? Was it all ages when it started, and then went to over 21, and then there was the Sunday Family Day?
Well, a lot of that is all based on the alcoholic beverage control. It's really the whole notion of how the event was booked, how it would work, and the ABC, which is alcoholic beverage control, they were tough. They were very tough. In the very beginning, the Gaslamp had a big red line around each of the borders of it with the ABC. They did not want to give liquor licenses out. It was horribly difficult in the beginning, and I remember there was Pete Case, Hal Brewer, and somebody Corona.
I don't remember him. But
Sure, it was a woman named Leslie Corona. Leslie Corona. So it was one of those ironies of Case, Corona, and Brewer. But anybody that lived during that time period and dealt with that group, they were tough. Pete Case was really a difficult guy. He did not see how we were looking. And again, I was younger then and very, big eyes, thinking, oh, yeah, we can do this, and it was horrible. I remember we had to card every single person that attended the festival that could get into a beer garden. And I remember a well-known Channel 10 newscaster was there with her father. And we had to call it by the book, and he was not allowed in. He was definitely older than 21, but he was not allowed to go in and get a beer. And so over the course of time, we became much we were so good at what we were doing by creating, well, the other issue was a beer being passed to a minor. So in order to create a beer garden, we had to create moats. So you might have a 4-foot fence, and then 8 feet further out was another 4-foot fence, so that a person that was inside the bar couldn't pass the beer to a minor.
Well, the rule was a 6-foot fence. This was done so we could actually keep the sight lines. So people who couldn't get in could still see stages. And we were the first people to figure that out and offer it. They weren't so big at first, but we actually showed, and I'm not that tall, but you can hand a beer over a 6-foot fence. Really hard to do it in a moat, and especially when you have security walk in the moat. So but that was all done, again, back to the music. When they said we have to have beer gardens, we came up with moats.
And again, we always wanted to have the event all ages and be in a position to have people enjoy the festival the way that you could. And part of it was how we were booking it and how the booking started to change. As one of the difficulties as a promoter was that as the audience got older, demands for that audience were greater. I want to sit down. I don't like crowds. I don't want to go when it might rain. Whereas your younger crowd didn't care. And so the more money that would be spent on chairs and tables and the impact of fire marshal restrictions based on capacity and the less of the crowd spending more, it just started to change. So we started to go younger. And it really changed. I mean, 2003 was the last year that we did 21 and up on Friday, Saturday, and then we did a Sunday all ages to try to have that family concept work. And we tried circuses, we tried kids shows, we tried everything possible to make that work, and it didn't. And in 2004, we took 10 stages and we brought them down to 3. And we took the acts and included some older acts, but started to introduce younger artists to perform. And that helped a great deal financially to make it make sense. Hopefully I think that answers your question.
I'm going to set this up a little bit because I thought I've read recently there's some things percolating with you right now. Maybe I misread that, but I'll give you a chance to talk about that. As I wanted to talk about what it was then and what it is now, and I was struck by the fact when I saw the movie Amazing Grace. I don't know if anybody saw that. It's just a film of her singing in a church. We are no longer that way. I think I went to the movie expecting this incredibly choreographed stage presentation, and it was just her singing at a lectern. My question to you is, my impression was as you called David Diaz up, and every year he did it for a song to do all the graphics or something, and you got these masks and you printed them out and you cut them out and everything. It's not that way anymore. There's data-driven mining, there's choreography, there's probably a strategy that almost takes away the improvisational aspect of what it was. So my question to you is, first of all, are you going to do anything? And second of all, what is the difference then compared to what it is now?
Well, it's Aretha Franklin, if I'm correct, right, on that movie. Production, sophistication, and how the level of sound and technology has really changed, and has changed as well as certainly the way people get information. It's all very different from then. Now it's if looking at festivals and how what makes a good festival work and what might not work. It's how do you create the environment? So the environment of being in a street, in a place as wonderful as Gaslamp, East Village has been. There is something very magical about it. When we moved the festival to other locations, we moved it to Qualcomm in 2005 and 2006. And from a production point of view, it was absolutely fantastic. We had 2 weeks to set up the festival, rather than setting up on Wednesday, 12:01, to open the festival at Friday at 4. I mean, there's a huge difference. But what happened is when we moved it to Qualcomm, we lost sort of the mojo of the wonderful streets. But it's impossible to do a festival in a street that doesn't have open space. From a production point of view and from a crowd point of view, it doesn't work. So in order to make a festival work in those kind of confines, you want to have street processions. You want to have lighting in certain areas. You want to light a building, or you want to take a white scrim and throw up some wonderful lighting on it and create an environment. And some festivals can do it and do it really well. And I was at a festival that didn't do it as well. They tried, but it didn't have a soul. So, yeah, you know what? And when you work with a group that has the same energy and make things, magic happen out of something that wouldn't normally happen, that's what creates that moment. But I mean, the inspiration of doing street processions and mariachi bands and Day of the Dead logos and things like that, that's all part of sort of a group effort and my sort of vision, and I think it really did work. So yeah, well, that was the Amazing Grace. Is that the one that had Mick Jagger in the back?
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Yep.
Which it wouldn't have been. You wouldn't make that movie today because it was so almost underproduced. And I guess that's sort of.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think of what year that must have been and how Aretha Franklin was. I mean, I've not seen it. I've seen the previews for it, and the previews are I mean, it's a really wonderful film.
Yeah.
So.
But you didn't answer the other part of his question.
Which was what?
What are you doing next?
Oh, well, you know what? I moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico in September. And I know people that do shows there. There's a nonprofit, and there's a new venue called Meow Wolf that's there. And that's George, for people that are really into Game of Thrones. George Martin lives in Santa Fe, and he has started and put the money into this new place called Meow Wolf, and it's expanding from Santa Fe to Las Vegas to Denver, and I think they have Phoenix is another venue, and I think that's right, DC is another venue. I think by the time it's done, it's a very innovative concept with a concert hall inside, sort of a. It's hard to explain, but it's like every different room has its own character, and you walk in, you're sort of enveloped by the senses.
So they have an ayahuasca garden instead of a beer garden.
There you go.
Are you involved in the other?
I have not. I know people that are in it, and I've just got there. What I'm doing is I'm enjoying concerts right now. So that's my joy right now.
Can Jimmy, you've got something going now. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, amongst other things, I'm helping the people who purchased Horton Plaza. And
Stockdale.
exactly. And we've had conversations, and Rob and I have had conversations about a possible concert series to run in the park. We'll see where that goes. It's at the very beginning.
Yeah.
Knocking we out.
When it comes out, give a very loud cheer.
I've got a tangential question. The name Hagey and tennis in San Diego is something I've never forgotten. Are you related to Chico as well?
Yes.
Yes.
Wow. I looked up to that player like nobody else, so I didn't know that was part of your legacy. That's fantastic.
Yes.
You also want to talk about there's
Yeah, can
even
you-
greater
I don't
families
know
in
about
tennis. There's a
tennis,
lot
so
of
tell
it.
me.
There's a lot of links.
You deserve to speak about that because it's
Yes.
a great. Chicos and
well,
the Higgies and the Redondos.
That's right. The Marina Redondo. I certainly remember her. Yes, I mean in the 70s we were. I'm the oldest of 8, and I had my brother Chico, my sister Suze, and my other sister Carrie Ann. They all went to Stanford, all played, won the NC2A tennis in singles and doubles, and my brother Chico is done very well. I was a tennis teacher.
Yes, he was.
So I couldn't beat my brother anymore, and he was younger than me. I had to go to a different level of teaching, and I had wonderful years of teaching with Vic Braden and Dennis Vandermeer, and had these really great times. But it allowed me, and at the end, it really allowed me to do the La Jolla San Diego Jazz Festival, which morphed into really street scene. Wow. So I was running back and forth, teaching tennis, making up the losses that I'd lost in jazz. So
Well, you did the thing at Sherwood Hall, right? At La Jolla.
I did. We had the first year we did that. We had a group called Old and New Dreams with Charlie Hayden, Don Cherry, Drew Redmond, and Ed Blackwell. 79. That was, and we didn't have air conditioning that day. The air conditioning broke. So, but those are really special memories for me.
And Ilarios, you booked Ilarios.
I booked Ilarios for 3 years. Yes, I did. Wow. So there was a night that we had Sun Ra at Ilarios. And Astrid Gilberto.
Yeah. Joe Pass.
Joe Pass.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So it was a wonderful thing being able to play tennis and to have that as my background, and that's how I met Michael. I mean, that's literally how this guy came into my life. Was they just lived up the street, and he came down, and my family had a tennis court, and that's how our legacy started.
That's exactly right.
So tennis has been good for me. So I appreciate it.
Which is better, tennis or music?
Music.
I think on behalf of all of us, just thank you. I mean, I'm not closing, you can do that, but San Diego, his personality has changed and it's evolved before our eyes, those of us who've been here a long time. But there's a certain kind of humility and workmanlike camaraderie that we all respect. We have it in different venues and different sectors, but it's really great to hear you guys talk about what you did, how you did it. They kind of, obviously this was a work of love and passion, not something sane people should be doing. But I think it speaks volumes about how San Diego once was, and maybe the kinds of characteristics we're trying to pull forward in its modern version. So it's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, it's thankful for that. It's been, it really was a whole time. It was a passion of real love. And what was it Bob Summer said to me? I can't remember. He said something like, I kept saying, we got to be able to do beer gardens or not do away with beer gardens and have it be an open sale. And what was the word? It was very tenacious. That was what he said to me. He says, "Do you ever stop?" But that was really where it was coming from. It was trying to create a great experience with wonderful artists that meant a lot to me. So, thank you.
Thank you. I don't think I can give a better closing, but we have a little gift for you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This was wonderful. I loved learning about it. I'm sad I never got to attend any of them, but it's awesome to hear about. And our next lecture will be on June 12th, and that's going to be Bill Swink talking about the history of the Padres. So I hope you all can join us for that one. If you're not on the newsletter, please sign up in the back, and you'll get an email about it. And thank you again. This was very wonderful.